Hello and welcome to the Open SAP course Building Apps with the ABAP RESTful Application Programming Model, Week 3, Unit 6, Implementing the Business Object Behavior. My name is Volker Drees and I'm a product expert for the ABAP RESTful Application Programming Model. In the previous unit, you learned how to enhance the business object behavior and how to project the relevant enhancements via your projection behavior definition. Now we will perform the implementation of the corresponding business logic. The area we will work on in this unit is highlighted in the development flow, the behavior implementation. We will use the ABAP development tool support to generate behavior implementation classes for each of the business object nodes, travel and booking. Technically, these classes are class pools, but in the context of RAP, we call them behavior pools. These classes then contain the required method signatures and empty method implementations to help us with the implementation task. The resulting behavior pools contain all the required business logic we need for the enhancements defined in the previous unit. Now let's go into the system, perform the behavior implementation and test the enhanced app. In the behavior implementation, we will make use of own T100 messages raised by an own exception class. That's why we first need to create an own message class. Right-click on your package, choose New, Other ABAP Repository Object. Type in the filter Message and choose Message Class. Click Next. Enter the name ZRAP MSG followed by your group ID. Provide a meaningful description. Click Next and assign the message class to a transport request. Create 5 messages with the numbers 1 to 5. Enter the following short texts. Save the new message texts. Right-click on your package and select New ABAP Class. Enter the name ZCM RAP followed by your group ID. And provide a meaningful description. The superclass needs to be CX static check. Click Next, assign a transport request and click Finish. In the public section, add the interface EF ABAP behavior message. Add the constants for all 5 messages as provided in the code snippet. Don't forget to replace the placeholder with your individual group ID. Replace the constructor with the following snippet. Define the required variables. In the constructor, map the importing parameters to the properties. Please note that we make use of the alpha conversion for all parameters of type num-c. Save and activate the ABAP class. Open the base behavior definition of our travel business object. Use the quick fix to generate the behavior implementation for the travel entity. In the wizard, leave the defaulted fields and click Next. Assign a transport request and click Finish. The behavior implementation takes place on the Local Types tab of the generated behavior pool. The tooling has generated one local class inheriting from CL ABAP behavior handler. In the private section, add constants for the travel status. The first method we are going to implement is the accept travel method. It sets the status to accepted for all provided keys using an EML modify statement. It uses the addition in local mode, which for example allows us to even change read-only fields while skipping feature and authorization control. After modifying the travel status, the action needs to provide the result as defined in the behavior definition. In our case, the result is $self, which means we must return the travel instance with all values for the given keys. Please note the usage of %TKY, which stands for transactional key. In the non-draft use case, it contains the same value as %key, which is the key of the related entity. In the next unit, when we enable the draft handling, the transactional key will automatically contain the isDraft indicator. Using transactional key reduces the need for reworking your implementation when you enable draft in your behavior definition, as the code can cope with active as well as with draft instances. Very similar to the accept travel action is the reject travel action. It sets the travel status to rejected. The first validation we are going to implement is the validate agency method. This validation checks the provided agency ID on save, either if the agency ID was changed or when an instance is created. Validation implementations typically start with reading the required data using EML. In our case, we want to read the agency ID for the provided keys. We derive an internal table with all distinct agency IDs and perform a database select to validate the existence. Then we loop over the travel table and check if an agency ID has been provided and if it exists. If the agency ID is either empty or does not exist in the check table, we raise a message using our exception class. As we make use of the so-called state messages, we first need to clear existing messages for the state area of this instance and then raise new ones, if required. State messages are important in the context of draft, where the messages are stored together with the state of the instance. In a non-draft use case, state messages are translated into transient messages by the framework. In the validate customer validation, we follow a very similar approach as for the validate agency method. We read the customer ID, check the existence on the database table, and raise state messages if an invalid customer ID was provided. The third validation is the validate dates one. It validates the begin and end date of the travel. The first determination we are going to implement is the set initial status determination. It sets the travel status to open when a new instance is created. Please note that determinations need to be idempotent, which means the result may not differ even if they are executed multiple times for the same key. The implementation first reads the travel status for all provided keys and sets the status to open for those that don't have a status yet. The calculate travel ID determination is used as an example to demonstrate a determination on save and to provide a readable travel identifier. Please note, the key of the travel business object is still the travel UUID. Instead of using a number range, the implementation simply fetches the highest existing travel ID from the database table and increases the value by 1. Please note, this approach does not ensure for gap-free or unique IDs. The next method we are going to implement is the calculate total price method. It's an on-modify determination for the fields booking fee and currency code. The implementation calls the internal action recalc total price for all provided travel keys. The internal action recalc total price calculates the total price by looping over all bookings, collecting all flight prices, and adding the booking fee. In case of different currency codes, it also performs a currency conversion. Reading the bookings for a travel instance takes place via a read-by association. The getFeatures method is used for instance-specific feature control. It expects in the result table an entry for each requested key, specifying if the related feature is enabled or disabled based on the state of the instance. In our example, we toggle the accept travel and reject travel actions based on the current status. Save and activate the behavior implementation. Open the base behavior definition of our business object. Use the quick fix to generate the behavior implementation for the booking entity. In the wizard, leave the defaulted fields and click Next. Assign a transport request and click Finish. The Calculate Booking ID determination is performed on Modify when a new instance is created. It first uses a read by association to read the related travel header. For each travel instance, all bookings are read in order to find the highest booking ID and to calculate the booking IDs for the entries that do not yet contain a booking ID. The Calculate Total Price determination calls the internal action Recalc Total Price, which we defined and implemented on route level. Save and activate the behavior implementation. We are now going to add authorization control to our business object. Open the base behavior definition. Uncomment the line Authorization Master instance. This declares the root node as Authorization Master. Instance-specific authorization requests are directed to the implementation of the Authorization Master. Scroll down to the booking entity and uncomment the authorization dependent line and specify the association travel. This declares the booking entity as authorization dependent. Modifying requests to the booking entity are directed to the authorization master following the provided association. Save and activate the behavior definition. Put the cursor on the master keyword of the authorization master declaration and use the quick fix to add the new method declaration to the behavior implementation. This pattern works for other declarations as well. If you, for instance, add a new action, you can use the quick fix to let the ABAP development tools generate the corresponding method declaration as well as an empty method implementation. In the trial environment, we can't influence the actual authorizations. Therefore, we need to simulate if a certain authorization, for instance, the update authorization, is present or not. This is done via some helper methods that we first need to declare. Make use of the quick fix to generate the implementations for all three methods. The isCreateGranted helper method performs an authority check using the authority object that was defined in the previous week. It checks if the create is allowed, which is the activity 01. For testing purposes, we set the result to true in all cases. This can of course be adjusted for testing different situations. Like the create, the update check helper method is implemented. The update is associated with the activity 02. In case a record is already present, the travel status of the before image is used in the check. The delete helper method checks the activity 06. Now we can implement the getAuthorizations method. It simulates the use case of using an editable field, travel status, for controlling the authorization. Therefore, the implementation reads the before image from the active persistence and uses this value when calling the helper methods. The various options via the requested authorizations structure are mapped to the activity values create, update, delete defined in the authorization object. These are then checked for each travel instance. The result table is put together based on the outcome of the respective authorization checks. Save and activate the behavior implementation. Now we are done with the implementation and can run the Fiori Elements UI. First you see two new actions, accept and reject travel. They are toggled based on the status of the selected travel instance. Create a new travel. Provide some inconsistent values. For the agency ID, the custom ID, start date and end date. When you click on Save, the corresponding messages are shown. Correct the values. And click Save. Now the validations are passed successful. You also see that the determinations were executed. The travel ID was calculated and the booking status was defaulted. Use the actions accept, reject to verify the instance-specific feature control. In the booking table, click Create to create a new booking instance for this travel. Provide some valid entries and click Save. Navigating back shows that the header instance was not reloaded and therefore the old total price is shown. This would require the definition of a side effect which we are not covering in this session. A manual refresh of the UI shows the updated total price. You can click on Delete to delete the travel instance. That was it for the system demo. We are now at the end of this unit. Let me do a short recap. In this unit you have learned about how to use the ABAP development tools to generate the behavior pools for the travel and the booking entities, how to implement the corresponding methods, and how the enhanced app provides a better user experience. Further information for this unit is available in the appendix of this presentation. Thanks for listening and see you in the next unit, where we will add draft handling to our business object.